for joining. Christine, I think we can get started.
I'm ready to go. Welcome. Good evening, everyone, to the Clearing the Air in Coeymans Community Forum. And I want to really thank the Sanctuary for Independent Media for hosting this forum. The amount of time it takes to do one of these events, the technology and the talent, we're so grateful for their support. My name is Christine Primamomo. I'm a retired nurse. I'm a resident of Coeymans and a member of the Clean Air Coalition of Greater Ravena-Coeymans. Our group started with a few town residents in 2019, but now includes scores of volunteers who are working to ensure that our local and state laws protect clean air in our town, in Albany County, and the wider Capital District. Tonight, you'll learn how the LafargeHolcim cement plant in Ravena, with the help of local officials, sidestepped the Albany County Clean Air bill that was passed last year. And you're going to hear about this decades-long struggle of residents of Cohoes who live next to the Norlite hazardous waste incinerator. I ask myself all the time, why are giant multinational companies, one located next to our high school and middle school and another in an environmental justice community, so determined to burn toxic waste and tires in our backyards? What does that mean for the health of our children, our air and our soil, our water, our homes, and our quality of life? Where are the regulatory agencies that are supposed to protect public health from these kinds of environmental hazards? We'll get those answers to these questions tonight, and you'll have an opportunity to ask some of your own of our panelists. So I am now going to turn the program over to our moderator, Corinne Carey, and she is with the Sanctuary for Independent Media.
Thank you so much, Christine. I'm really excited about our event tonight and really about how empowering the on-the-ground activities have been. Before we dive in, I'd like to acknowledge the Mohican people. It is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that the Sanctuary for Independent Media, the host of tonight's event, resides upon the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are indigenous peoples of the lands of New York. Despite tremendous hardships and being forced from their lands, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. Tonight's event is a program of the Sanctuary for Independent Media, and for those of you not yet familiar with the Sanctuary, we are a nonprofit community organization based in North Central Troy, just across the Hudson River from Albany. We operate a block-wide campus of activities. If we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, we would be sitting in the Sanctuary for Independent Media, our headquarters that doubles as a telecommunications facility and performance venue where we host speakers, independent film screenings, and live music. It's also home to 2 recording studios for our community radio station, WOOC 105.3 FM. We host a volunteer-driven nightly news and public affairs show called the Hudson Mohawk Magazine, which is how I first got involved here as a radio producer. Here at the Sanctuary for Independent Media, we also run a variety of youth programs. We operate Colored City Growers, our urban gardens, and bring all of our activities out into Freedom Square, our outdoor performance venue. This upcoming spring, we are thrilled to be opening the doors to our newest building on the block, the Nature Lab Urban Environmental Education Center, which will house a community science lab. We do a lot, and we document everything. You can see it all if you visit Sanctuary TV, our YouTube channel, which has more than 50,000 subscribers from all over the world. We are live streaming this event on Facebook, and we'll be uploading an edited version of this video to the Sanctuary TV soon. When it's up, all of our event registrants will receive a link. Tonight's event is being recorded, and if you have your camera enabled, you could be visible on our recording. Similarly, we'll be making the resources and discussion shared in the chat box available in the future. In order to ask a question tonight or to chat with the panelists or attendees, look to the bottom of your screen. You'll see a chat box. And if you have a question throughout tonight's program, please type it into the box. We'll call on as many of you as we can when we get to the question and answer section, but a lot of times the questions can be answered right in the chat box for everyone to see the resources. If you ask a question and we ask you to unmute yourself, please be ready to ask the question live. You can also send a private message to someone through the chat function as well. I want to let folks know that in addition to our excellent speakers tonight, we're also joined by Judith Enck, the former US EPA Regional Administrator for Region 2, and Mike Ewall of Energy Justice Network. Neither one will be speaking formally tonight, but will be here as a resource for all of us in the chat box and maybe when we get to the Q&A section. Our event is going to run until 8:30 p.m. tonight. So thank you all for being with us. We're going to get started by sharing a short video. This is a fantastic video about the activities of folks in the community, created by Sonia Stark of Pilot Girl Production.
I'm here at the Town of Coeymans offices, and I have a 1 o'clock appointment to go in and deliver petition for a permissive referendum. Hello? Yeah, Christine Primomo. I have an appointment with Candace. My name is Christine Primomo, and I live in the Town of Coeymans, and we just delivered a petition with 254 signatures from Town of Coeymans voters who would like a permissive referendum held on our clean air law amendments. After the vote was kind of rammed through at the town board meeting on November 23rd, we felt that we had to have some remedy. How could the citizens of the town be able to have some voice? We put together a petition. We gathered up our volunteers. They went out door to door, made phone calls, sent emails, and gathered less than 2 weeks, actually, 254 signatures when we only needed 144 for the petition to be filed. People in the town had no idea that this was happening. They all felt that because the Albany County Legislature passed a bill for clean air, that law in Albany County would protect us here in Coeymans, even if our town board decided to strip away the protections that we had in our law. When they found out that was not the case, they're very upset.
Not only do we have the pandemic, but we had a big snowstorm, we have the holiday season here, but we were really overwhelmed and really heartwarmed just by all the responses, and so many of them positive. It was just really sweet and thoughtful that people wanted to show their generosity to us for going out and making this effort and including them. I think everybody really liked being included.
If the residents of this town do not act now, it may be too late.
We need to make sure that she's qualified to sign the petition.
My name is Carlo Diolovera. I'm a resident of the village of Ravena. I've been living here for about 18 years now. As you can see, we are in sight of the Lafarge smokestack. About a month ago, we learned that the town board had amended the Clean Air Act, in essence gutted the entire law that protected the residents of the village and the town of Coeymans from pollutants being emitted from the Lafarge plant. I remember listening to Supervisor McHugh mentioning that there were just a handful of residents who opposed the amendment. I was only out for 2 days and got 95 signatures, which is, for me, is amazing. We knocked on doors of Republicans, Democrats, conservative, liberals, and they are all concerned, equally concerned. People didn't even know what the town had done. They had no knowledge of the consequences of the amendments to us, to the residents. So they were very supportive of what we are doing and were volunteering also to help out in every way they could. This is not a political issue. This is not a Republican versus Democrat, rich versus poor. We're all breathing the same air, and if we don't take this seriously, it may be too late. I think that the board should be sensitized by our actions, and if they felt that there are only a handful of people who oppose the amendment, I think now we send them a message that there is a lot more people in our town who are concerned about those issues and that they should listen to us.
Oh, that was a fantastic video. For folks who want to learn more and watch another video, there we posted in the chat box a link to the longer video, which explains the issue even more, that you can watch on your own time. But now I'm really pleased to introduce Carlo Diolovera. He is a Ravena resident and an attorney. He is the star of the video that you just watched, one of the stars, and he's actively involved in the community's Ravena Soccer Club board and volunteers as a coach during the year, and most recently has been involved in the Clean Air Coalition. I'd like to invite Carlo to speak now. Carlo?
Hi, thank you, Corinne. Good evening, everybody. Just a correction, I'm no longer on a soccer board, just in case my fellow board members are also listening. I'll be back. But I want to thank our sponsors, Hudson Mohawk Environmental Action Network, the Energy Justice Network, and the Clean Air Coalition, obviously, that I'm a member of. I want to also thank the Sanctuary of Independent Media for hosting this debate, and also thank you, thank my co-presenters, and I'm excited to be presenting with them. Jane Williams, the chair of the National Sierra Club Clean Air team, whose expertise in the subject is unmatched. Also, Matt Miller, who is our Albany County Legislator, who is a local teacher and also a strong supporter in our community in Albany. And obviously Joseph Richie, who is someone who is advocacy for environmental responsibility and clean air in our community, as I include co-host to be part of our community, has been admirable. So thank you all. I've been asked to speak about the permissive referendum, obviously, and the Albany County Clean Air Law and the amendments to the Coeymans Clean Air Law. As our video showed, unfortunately, our permissive referendum was not successful. We had two goals with our permissive referendum. One of our goals was to stop the amendments from going into effect in a very short period of time. I remember when I was invited to join the coalition was probably the second week of December. And we had only a few weeks to be able to pull this off. At the time, someone had recommended that we try a permissive referendum. We drafted something, and unfortunately, under New York law, amendments to laws are not subject to permissive referendums, which is a limitation that doesn't exist in other states. But we also had the most important goal with our permissive referendum was actually achieved, which was to call attention to this issue in our community. And in that regard, I think we were highly successful. As the video showed, we were collecting signatures. It wasn't really 10 days, it was actually about 4 days, it was about 2 weekends. And we were able to gather 254 signatures from local residents who were equally concerned about the amendments that had just been adopted in the town of Coeymans. So just a little background, in speaking about the Coeymans Clean Air Act, which was passed in 2019. The Coeymans Clean Air Act at the time was the toughest clean air law in the state. And what the Clean Air Act sought was to limit the amount of waste being burned in the town, and also to require that Lafarge had a continuous monitoring of certain pollutants that were actually not being monitored by EPA and DEC. And we have other experts on the panel that can talk about that better than I could. But at the time, the Coeymans Clean Air Act was the toughest in the state. That was until the Albany County passed its own law. So the Albany County passed its clean air law in September 2020. And as opposed to Ravena, the town of Coeymans, which sought to limit the burning of garbage, the Albany County Clean Air Law is an outright ban on the burning of waste, including tires. So the Albany County law was tougher than the Coeymans law itself. It was passed by, I believe, it was 32 votes to 7. It was at the time, I believe Lafarge also made some comments about threatening lawsuit, and Dan McCoy had mentioned that, that he was very supportive of the law, and he said, bring it on. If you want to sue us, bring it on. So that brings us to what happened in Coeymans. And one would ask, if Albany County passed a law that is more protective than what we have, why would we change our law? And this is why what happened in Coeymans is so important to all of us in Albany County. And I think Matt Miller can speak about that as well. The New York law has something that is called the home rule, which gives local governments authority to regulate their own community. So under this home rule, a town like Coeymans can pass its own law, and by passing its own law, they can opt out of the protections of the county law. But again, why would someone want to do that if the county of Albany has a law that is protecting the air that we breathe? Why would someone want to amend that? Well, I learned of those amendments on the evening before it was adopted. It was November 22nd. I received an email saying, let's protest the amendments to the Coeymans Clean Air law, which goes to show how publicized that was. It wasn't really very publicized. The amendments were put up for, there was a public hearing, I believe, on November 19th. And 4 days later, the board, the town of Coeymans board decided to adopt the law on November 23rd. So there wasn't a lot of time for local residents to understand what was going on and to speak out about their thoughts on those amendments. Just as a matter of background, the same board had held 4 public hearings on a resolution as to how many chickens or livestock could be raised in the hamlet. But a public hearing on whether to amend the clean air law was done only once, and within a matter of 4 days, they adopted the law. So one would ask, why would such a thing happen? Why would the board do such a thing? So there were recommendations made by the board, made to the board by a committee that was composed of 3 individuals who supposedly investigated the clean air law and concluded that the clean air law was unenforceable, and that if the clean air law remained on the books, that the town of Coeymans could be sued by Lafarge. And in fact, Lafarge had sent out a letter to the town board threatening to sue the town if amendments were not made to the law. As a civil rights attorney, I have never seen a municipality receive a letter threatening to sue them and then having them turn to you and say, oh, okay, don't sue me, I'll do whatever you want. That doesn't happen. At least I never seen it. But that's exactly what happened in the town of Coeymans, believe it or not. The committee made a recommendation to the town that they had 2 options. They had the option of repealing the Albany County, the Coeymans Clean Air Law, because then they relied on a case that was decided in Baltimore. And I don't want to get too technical here, but it's not really applicable to our clean air law. But they relied on that case to say that the local law was preempted by federal law. And this term preemption is what it really means is that you cannot have a local law that is in conflict with a federal law. Okay, so what Lafarge claim was that the Clean Air Law was in conflict with the federal law, the federal Clean Air Law, because the EPA had granted Lafarge certain permits that allow them to burn waste and tires in the town of Queens. Well, the federal law actually does not preempt the local law in that sense, because the federal law allows local municipalities to regulate issues such as the environment. The EPA simply does not have the manpower to regulate every single local industry. So they actually give that authority to states and municipalities to do that job. And New York law does the same. So long as your law is not in conflict with the purpose of the federal law, which in this case, clean air is to make sure that the air is clean and the environment is protected and there is no pollutants being emitted in local communities. So long as you don't go against that purpose, then you can create your own law. So our board was faced with this decision. Should we repeal the law or should we make amendments that were requested by Lafarge? And that's actually what the recommendation says. And our board decided that it would be better to amend our law as requested by Lafarge. So what actually happened in Coeymans is quite impressive, because we have a Albany County law that is more protective than our law. And if the town of Coeymans was concerned about being sued by Lafarge, as I believe was one of the reasons given by the board for the amendment, all they needed to do would be to repeal the law entirely, because we would have fallen under the jurisdiction of the Albany County law. That's one option. The other option would have been to simply not do anything to the law, because the Albany law, the Albany County law is more protective than ours, and our Clean Air law had a provision that said if there is a county or a state law that is stricter than ours, then that law applies. When Albany law passes its own law, our board didn't have to do anything, because you would have fallen under the jurisdiction of the county anyway. So on November 22nd, when I learned that those amendments are being made, that's when I decided to read a little bit about it. And I was like, what's going on here? And I had a lot of questions, and that's how I became involved with this coalition. With my involvement, since my involvement in the coalition, I have learned a lot more than I know about the type of pollutants that are being emitted, type of permits that are being issued to industries like Lafarge, the type of monitoring that is done by the EPA and DC, which is not ideal. And we know that because everybody has heard of Flint, Michigan and Hoosick Falls, and those were cities that were relying on the protection of their environment on the EPA and the DEC, or in the case of Michigan, their state agency. So what we are concerned about with our coalition is that by amending the law in the manner that our town board did, in essence, they obliterated the law. They eliminated any protections for our town. And ironically, they also did the same for all of our neighbors, even though the county of Albany prohibits the burning of waste and tires. In the town of Coeymans, this is not allowed, and it has consequences to our neighbors as well. So this is a little background on my take on the Albany County law and the effects that the amendments had in our law, which in essence obliterated.
Carlo, thank you so much. That was a great introduction to the issue. As you can see, for folks who've joined recently, We're posting some resources in the chat box. If you have questions for Carlo or any of the other speakers, just post your question there and we'll either answer it in the chat or we'll get to it when we open it up for questions and answers. But now I am really pleased to introduce to you Jane Williams. Jane is the chair of the National Sierra Club Clean Air team. She's an environmental policy expert with 30 years of experience in policy and advocacy. She's joined us at the sanctuary for other environmental forums in the past. She's a fantastic resource for us. Jane has extensive knowledge on incinerators. She's going to talk to us tonight about the health threats of burning tires and waste for fuel versus coal in cement kiln incinerators. And just for fun, Jane's got a great background that shows what burning tires look like. So Jane, why don't you take it away?
So I chose this background. I went and found it online and I chose it specifically for this presentation because I know most people know that when you burn tires out in your yard or you have a pile of tires and they happen to catch on fire, I mean, they look horrible, right? I mean, tires are really bad when they get burned. So I want to emphasize that of everything that you would want to burn in your backyard, like tires would be like the last thing. I mean, plastic would be really bad too. You know, so I just, you know, like tires are really bad. The other thing about when you burn tires is, believe it or not, there's a lot of metal in tires. And when you burn metal, it doesn't burn, right? Metal is an element. It's an elemental form. And you can try to collect it in the bag houses and the air pollution control devices at the kiln, but inevitably metals will come out. I mean, that's just going to happen. And the more metal you burn, the more it will come out. Okay. So I wanted to give you, I recognize the situation that everyone is in and how incredibly frustrating it is. And so I wanted to give, I thought the best thing I could do for you is to give you a lens through which you could see the problem. Tire burning is very bad. Mike Ewald has done a great job of showing, you know, here's all the pollutants that increase when you burn tires. And it's the most toxic pollutants. You get more metals, you get more PAHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, you get more dioxin. Of the buffet of toxicity, the things that are most toxic are the things that are increasing. Okay. And so like everyone knows that now. 20 years ago, we weren't really sure, you know, like, you know, what was going to come out when we burned tires in a cement kiln. Now we have a really good idea. It's some of the most toxic chemicals that come out of a stack. So we know that. Your cement kiln is renowned in the world of the cement kiln activists because you have a school. You have a school complex in between your quarry and your cement plant. It has to be one of the most adverse and frustrating land uses that many of us have ever seen. You know, I worked on a cement kiln in Speed, Indiana, where we had an elementary school right across the street. And they were going to plan to burn hazardous waste there. And they built these giant tanks in a flood zone within a stone's throw of the school. We were able to stop them from doing that. But besides that situation, the situation at Ravena, at this kiln is one of just the worst, you know, land use issues I've seen, where you have your most sensitive receptors, people that you do not want exposed to toxic chemicals, literally in between your limestone quarry and your kiln. So you have a lot of moral high ground there to to stand upon, like, you don't want this. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a like 100,000 foot level picture of the cement kiln industry. And I actually started my activism 30 years ago, working on a cement plant that is near my home that wanted to burn hazardous waste. And then other plants have wanted to burn tires over time and burn all kinds of crazy stuff. All right. The cement industry has to pay for its fuel. And the fuel cost is one of its largest expenditures. And so anything that they can do to reduce that fuel cost really helps their bottom line. And so the industry, starting back in the 70s during the energy crisis, realized that the energy crisis created a perfect opportunity for it to advocate to burn waste, because it wasn't burning fuel, even though it burned coal, not oil back then. And it got these exemptions under what's called the sham recycling exemptions in the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And since that time, there's been groups all across the country, similar to your community, that have fought hazardous waste incineration in cement kilns. And now, most of the kilns, all the kilns wanted to burn back then. There was like 120 kilns, and they all wanted to burn. There's only about 15 now that actually burn hazardous waste. But the second wave of this is now happening, where kilns want to burn trash, because trash used to be mostly paper, but now trash is mostly plastic. The plastic component of trash in your own household, if you think about what you're throwing away, well, that plastic is a fossil fuel derivative. It actually has, BTUs in it. It would actually burn. And so we see this growing interest by the cement industry to burn waste, whether it's tires, whether it's plastic, or municipal solid waste, or medical waste. Hazardous waste, they know, is really hard to get, because if someone was standing in your community saying, we're going to start bringing in train cars full of hazardous waste and burn it, you'd be jumping up and down. So they know that's a lot harder, but that's what they burn at the Norlite kiln right up the street from you, that Mr. Richie's going to talk about, I'm sure, later. So now what we see is this growing interest from the sustainable cement movement to reduce greenhouse gases by lowering coal burning and to burn waste. And tires are like the ticket that allows you to say, I'm burning waste in this kiln. Now let's go burn this other waste, and let's go burn this other waste. So it's like the entrance exam to get into college, right? A lot of times what we see is that kilns start burning tires, then they want to start burning other stuff. So it's like a gateway into burning more things. So that's the one thing I do want to let you know, is that sort of what we see industry-wide. The other thing is adding different materials to clinker to reduce the amount of clinker, which is like the glue that holds the sand and aggregate together for cement, is to add different materials to that. And we're seeing like a widespread movement towards adding things like blast furnace slag and municipal waste burning incineration fly ash. I know that New York especially has apparently this fly ash waste problem, trying to figure out, they're going to expand landfills to get rid of fly ash. So all of these things, when you add these things to the cement production process at a kiln itself, you increase the toxicity. So if you start bringing in, blast furnace slag from the steel industry, that adds to the toxicity of, it has to be ground, and it has to be crushed, and it has to be added to the clinker. You start adding fly ash, that stuff has to be, mixed in, ground into the clinker. You burn tires, and you burn plastic, and you're burning medical waste. So the whole sort of concept of this whole thing about reducing the cost. A lot of cement plants get paid a tipping fee to burn tires. A lot of cement plants get paid a tipping fee to burn waste. So now instead of having to buy coal, they're getting paid to take a waste. So that's why there's so much political pressure. It's very important to understand that you greatly increase the profitability of your cement plant if you can burn waste. Now, ironically, the Lafarge company actually owned the same plant that I worked on here in my community. And they're French, they were primarily a French company then. I know now they're French and Swiss. And they have been in the business of making cement now for a very long time, many decades. And they have come up against community opposition before. So they have rather sophisticated ways of handling that. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a warning flag there that it's not like they haven't done this before, right? Some of you are new to it, but they're not. And they're very sophisticated, all right? Just to give you one idea, one of our members flew to Paris and went to the Lafarge board of directors meeting, the stockholders meeting, and delivered like this huge petition and a letter from the community surrounding this plant here in California that was burning hazardous waste at the time. So those are like my two big lessons. My last thing that I will stay on so people can ask questions, but the last part of the lens that I want to leave you with is the lens of benefits and burdens. Okay, if you can look at the problem that you're facing in your community from their perspective, from Lafarge's perspective, think about how they benefit from what they're proposing to do, and think about how your community is burdened. Okay, so I've never come across a situation where you've got a large multinational company that's a major polluter. Now, the cement industry is one of the largest polluters in the world. The greenhouse gases they emit are the industry-wide are more than many medium-sized countries. They also emit massive amounts of particulate matter. When you look at the top 100 PM 2.5 emitters in the country, you will see cement plants scattered in there everywhere. They are, on the order of like a large polluting utility or a refinery. They're some of the most noxious polluting point sources that we have in our industrial, categories. And they're about money, and what they care about is their bottom line. And that's why they want to burn waste. And so thinking about how they're burdening your community, and especially having your school in the middle of this operation, is just unbelievable. And how they are benefiting and you are burdened. I leave you with that lens to look at the problem through. And, the environmental justice issues in Cohoes at the Norlight facility are shocking and amazing. I haven't gotten a chance to look at what that looks like in Ravena, but I urge you to really talk. It's a very unique situation where you've got the school literally virtually in the middle of the facility. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope that my comments and my presentation to you has been helpful today.
Jane, that was fantastic. Benefits and burdens, is that what you said?
Benefits and burdens. Who benefits and who is burdened by the proposal?
Such a great way of looking at it. We've got some great questions in the chat box. We're going to get to those after we hear from our next two speakers. For those who joined late, just take a look at the chat box at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions or you want to follow the conversation that's happening there, just click on that chat box. The next speaker that we have this evening is Matt Miller. Matt is a Selkirk resident and AP biology, Regents and AP biology teacher in the Ravena Ravena-Coeymans-Selkirk Schools. Matt is serving his first term in the Albany County Legislature, representing the 36th Legislative District. He serves on the Conservation, Sustainability and Green Initiatives and Health Committees in the County Legislature. Matt, can you take it over from here?
I'm ready to go. So thanks for having me again. I'm glad to see so many people are out here. Coming third here, I fear I might be the weak link in this great lineup of speakers here, with what they're able to provide versus what maybe I can provide to you guys. I think Carlo and Jane both covered some of the things I wanted to cover. And I think I'll start something I didn't have planned, but jumping right off of what Jane said, when you talk about benefits and burdens, the number one burden is our children, plain and simple. That's what this comes down to. I'm a teacher, 28 years teaching on that facility directly across from Lafarge. I've coached on the field, sent my kids to those schools. I've been the energy manager there when we had a six-year program, and we used to have to, the filters on top of the building on humid days would get caked up with the concrete dust, and we'd have to change out the filters so that they would actually give us money to do some of that. But we don't know, we never looked at what else was in those things. I'm sure Joe's going to talk about the dust on the cars up at Norlight, and we could get our car washed in Ravena, come to school that next day, and by the time you came out, it looked like you had a nice little dusting of snow on your car. And I'll be honest, in my early years there, I never really thought about what was in there. And that was one of the problems that I think a lot of us face. So the real burden in all this is our developing young adults sitting directly across the street, playing, having recess, being nice and innocent out there, and what it's doing to their brains and their bodies. And I think no matter what else I say, I'll leave you with that. That's probably the thing you should leave with from me. So as I mentioned, I have been teaching there for a long time, and I mentioned some of these other parts about it. But on the legislative side of it, we knew going in, when I first got elected, Coeymans was just trying to pass their law. And so what we decided at the county level was we didn't know how it was going to turn out. We thought the election might get turned and the board might flip down in Coeymans, which it did. So we began working at the county level to come up with a bill that would take away the problems in Coeymans and just override it, take care of it. We learned very quickly, as you've heard, that the environmental conservation law let the local municipalities be able to get around that if they so choose. Now, we knew this coming in. We had some people on our team, a couple that are sitting here tonight, that wanted us to go even stronger, but we had to pass a bill that we could get bipartisan support, even our own caucus on, and then also bipartisan support that our lawyers would go for as well. So knowing that was an issue going in, we also knew that here's the one part about that law. Not only would Coeymans have to amend their law, they would have to expressly allow the burning of tires. Okay, they had a very strong law that said they couldn't, and quite honestly, when they ran in their town, the new board that tried to take over, they ran on non-repealing because they knew if they repealed, the county law would then take effect and they would not be able to burn at all. So our law was really about a burn ban. It was about protecting the entire county from burning any new wastes, particularly tires or any other kind of hazardous waste beyond what was already being burned. We weren't trying to shut down any businesses that were already doing some of that, but we were stopping anything new from coming. And that was the idea of the tires. So as Carlo told you, that's what they did. They were smart and they came in there and they got their own little committee together and said, oh, we're not going to repeal. We told you we wouldn't repeal and we're not going to repeal. Instead, they gutted out all the parts that protected the community, and then more obnoxiously completely said you can go ahead and burn tires and you can go ahead and burn hazardous waste. And that was really a big problem. So the biggest answer to resolving that is really we need to have a big push at the state. We need to now turn around and get to our state leaders and get a statewide ban on this, which would override that. They wouldn't be able to overcome that. So I would urge all of you to start talking to the people at the state legislature and start trying to build that kind of support at that level. It is difficult. As you've heard already, there's a lot of money being thrown around, and our DEC has not been helping us very much because they're trying to get rid of tires. They have a big tire problem and they really want to get rid of tires, and this is one way for them to get rid of their problem. So we can use you guys to help and get out there to start trying to fight this at the state level, because that's going to be our best answer. A lot of what Jane said, these guys have been doing this for a long time and we have not. you know, I rewatched Tony Stark's video, the longer one that's posted earlier here. And I listened to Mike Ewald bring up something that I missed the first time I watched it. And beyond the dioxins and the furans and all this other stuff that they're the #1 polluters on is benzoate-pyrene. And that is, for people that don't know, that's the chemical that we discovered directly, was our first direct link to smoking and lung cancer, right? They knew that this immediately, that chemical mutates the P53 gene, which is called the guardian angel gene. It checks our DNA all day long to make sure there's no problems. And if it's there, it fixes it. And benzoate-pyrene directly mutates that protector gene, right? And they're already, Mike said in 2017, I think his report was they were the #1 polluter for benzoate-pyrene. So, you know, when we did this bill, they sent out a lot of scientists, a lot of people to talk science at the county ledge meetings. And I just would caution that some of the stuff they're saying is not untrue, but it's how they sell it. Burning tires does lower the greenhouse emissions by about, I think it was 2% or so. So that's a good thing. But they don't tell you the other part about what it also puts into the air. So yes, they're lowering some of the greenhouse gases, but they're putting way more dangerous chemicals into our air, into our water. I mean, we're talking about clean air here, but don't forget the water, don't forget the soil. We are somewhat still a farming community down there. That's can't be overlooked at all. And we can't overlook what's happening across the river, that this is going to go across the river as well. We talked about the high school, middle school, and then I'll get to my big point. But we talk about the high school, middle school being right there and the effect. You also have to realize that just south of that plant, about just over a mile south, is Peterby-Coeymans Elementary. And only 5 miles directly north is A.W. Becker Elementary. So we talk about that westerlies are pretty common in our area. If you ever coach there, which I have, you get killed by the winds coming off the quarry, right? But we have a lot of southerly winds too, coming from the south all summer long, blowing up to Peterby. All winter long, it blows from the north and blows it right to Peterby-Coeymans. And those are the kids we have to be worried about as well. They sort of get ignored in all this, but it cannot also be missed about the really young kids that are also developing. So because you've heard a lot of this other stuff already, I think I'll go to my third point and try to really focus on that. What's being missed in a lot of this is not all about Lafarge in this particular case. Lafarge is going to be the benefactor of this process of burning fuel to lower their costs and increase their profit, okay? But they have to get the tires from somewhere. And what's being missed in all of this is a gentleman named Carver Laraway and the Carver companies, okay? And they have essentially, he and his company has taken over Coeymans. I've taken the joking, calling it no longer the town of Coeymans, but it's the town of Carver, okay? Because they came in, they didn't like what's going on. He got a large contract with the New York State DEC to collect tires. I believe it was a $10 million contract to collect waste tires from around New York State. Well, this guy's got to do something with those tires. And conveniently, directly across the street from him, you know, with a big conveyor belt right there, is Lafarge, who wants to burn tires. All right. So what Carver does is he runs the port down there, and he's already been in all kinds of troubles with the DEC for dredging the port when he wasn't allowed to make it a deeper water port, bringing in further industries, TCI, which burns, cleans up the transformers, from the electrical lines, with a lot of PCBs in there, and a bunch of other industries. But they're also been buying land. And if anybody knows the history of Coeymans, when I first moved there in the early 90s, the big battle was still going on because Albany wanted to move the dump down there, the landfill. And they were able to successfully fight that. And I see some people on here tonight that were very big in that fight. And they fought that off for a lot of different reasons. They were able to do so. But what Carver's doing is trying to renew that effort quietly and through the back door. He's looking to bring a big solid waste industry to the river. He's got the port already. He's got nearby rail service, and they've actually asked the town already to add a throughway entrance directly from, it would be a truck only, business only exit from the throughway directly into the area, the industrial area that they have created back there that he's in charge of, that he owns. So they truck all the tires in, they could rail the tires in, and they can bring the stuff in and by water as well. Why does that all come into play? Well, it is a depressed area. We're talking about environmental justice issues here. All right. We're talking about a situation where it is a very depressed area and lower income area. And Carver has thrown money around like crazy. He's buying up houses. He's tearing down decrepit ones. He's putting some money into building new ones. They built all new roads in that area and fixed some of the problems that have been there for a long, long time that the town couldn't do. They put a ton of money into politics to turn the board over, created the Friends of Coeymans Facebook site. And now they sort of own the town. They can do whatever they want. And they're putting money out there to get some additional things so they can store tires, they can store municipal waste, they can prepare the tires, have to shred them and all that. So they're gonna have facilities to do all of that. So what I wanted to make sure I just made you guys understand is it's a bigger issue beyond just the clean air. He's using that as a way to start a bigger process he wants to do. And so it's going to be a two-headed monster that we have to stop. I think Jane brought up some tremendous points, really, that 1,000-foot view that she was talking about and what we have to fight against. But there's another fight in there with the Carver companies as well and what they want to do. So really the next steps are really I think you guys that are out here today need to help us and start getting involved more. We need to sort of find those people who still remain from the old Coeymans dump fight and get them engaged as well. We need everybody to start talking to the state and get the state people to, hopefully some of our state representatives, to start getting behind this. They have a lot of pressure. You heard it earlier. Dan McCoy was under heavy pressure not to approve our county law. We had to really work on Dan because Lafarge was in his face and some other groups were really pushing it because, again, they're very good at throwing that money around. So, that's just some of the other parts I wanted to get in there for you guys. But remember, it all comes down, all right, to all of our health. It should be people over profits. And we have to protect the children in not only Coeymans, but across the river and in whole of Albany County. So thank you all for your time.
Matt, thank you so much. I was a terrible science student, but my goodness, I love listening to science teachers talk. So thank you for that. I really appreciated it. You encouraged us to get the DEC, or you talked about the DEC and getting the state to take action. And nobody knows more about that than our next speaker, I think, and that is Joe Richie. Joe Richie is an environmental justice advocate and is the executive director of Saratoga Sites Against Norlight Emissions. He's a student at Syracuse University studying environmental policy. Joe is going to talk about his experience with the DEC and the EPA and his work to hold them accountable for protecting the health of Coeymans' neighbor to the north, the city of Cohoes. Joe, what can you tell us?
Well, I think the question is, where can I start? Where do I start, really? First of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this forum. It's really an honor, and it's really, proves that this is a real community-led, push to get these issues solved. So I really want to say thank you for that. Just to really put it into perspective, what Jane was mentioning earlier, it's really just, in my eyes, it's just sick that Lafarge is located pretty much right next to a school. And I actually have a connection to that too, because I used to play soccer for Cohoes, and we would go up there and we would play soccer, and I'd be like, wow, that facility kind of looks familiar, because I was just so used to big industry like that, because living 100 feet from Norlight at Saratoga Sites, I was like, wow, I wonder what they do over there. And then I would see, oh, I believe that the soccer field was donated by Lafarge, or they give them money, and our soccer team would always love to play at Ravena because of the nice fields. But little did we realize that as we were running around and using our lungs to the max capacity, the stuff that we might have been breathing in at that time. So I just want to say it's just a really sick image, and it really proves that this is a community issue. My air is your air. And I really think that we need to really focus on this, because a lot of times when people are talking local issues, they think, oh, well, that person's from another part of the state, or that person's all the way in California. We all share a common humanity. We all share a common, they're called the commons, the global commons. We share this air. and we have to treat it with a sense of responsibility. And we have to hold these companies accountable for what they do. So that was just my little quick personal connection to Lafarge. But in regards to what we've been doing in the most northern point of Albany County and in Cohoes, we've been fighting a really big fight. And it's completely relevant to this because of just everything we've been going through, from the city to the county legislator to the state government and hopefully federal government someday. But to really just hammer home, we've been working with the DEC. I put that in quotation marks because we've brought up a lot of compelling issues to the DEC in the past year, roughly. This weekend will actually be 1 year since we found out of the AFFF incineration at Norlight. And here we are today. So, we've been working with DEC, trying to work with these people, but every time we get some sort of evidence, every time I would send in a photo, I'm sure you've all seen it, and if you haven't, my finger is completely green or black or whatever, depending on the photo you see. And that happens daily. It's a daily event, daily affair that I have to clean my car. I have to really just look at what I'm breathing in. And at first I had no idea what I was breathing in. Just what Matt Miller was saying, you just have no idea what you're breathing in because you're living life. You're doing what you need to do to get by. And that's just especially what the people at Saratoga sites are doing. They're just trying to get by because it's a low income area and there's no other way to say it. And it's an unfortunate reality because, the DEC definitely says that this area is a environmental justice area. And, what would that mean to you? He's like, oh, environmental justice area. They're really focused on getting what, looking into Norlight, looking into the salt kill that's right next to Norlight, really focusing on the air quality issues and water. And they just don't get it. And it's just a shame because they actually have an on-site monitor. And the issues that we've brought up time after time after time, it's almost like it's brand new to them, which it isn't. If you go on their website, you see that there's been complaints of fugitive dust, smells, odors, people's lives being ripped apart, all documented on the DEC website from 1990. And that's just in the 90s. This facility has been here since, I believe, the late 50s. So it's just incredible that they allow this facility to do what they do, and especially down at Lafarge. Why would you allow a facility to operate so close to where your children are going to school, so close to where your children are trying to get an education? They're trying to learn and they're trying to do the best that they can for themselves. And then down the road, people wonder why, in especially low-income areas, a lot of the children end up with learning disabilities because of the toxins that are infused into their bloods from these types of facilities. And it's a shame. And you would never see this type of facility in an area where people have money. You would never see it. And that's the honest truth. It's a sick truth, but it's the honest truth. We've been dealing with the issue of gentrification all over the county, and especially in Cohoes. People often wonder, why don't the people of Saratoga sites move out? Why do you stay next to this type of facility? And the question and the answer is, we can't. Every single year that goes by, the rent of new apartments that are being built are $1,500, $2,000 for rent. And that's a mortgage, So, I mean, people who, especially like my mother, a single mother, it's really tough. And I get uncomfortable bringing her up because she's just such a hero to me. But it's just a shame. And the DEC does not they don't give a crap about my mother. They don't care about your mother or father or grandfather. They care about their image. That's the sad, sick reality that we live in. And I sit here today infuriated at this agency for their lack of just, I don't even know what to say, competence, incompetence, for their lack of knowledge, for their lack of respect for what's going on. I sent them a picture last month around Christmas Eve of black snow. They come to me last week during the DEC session and said, oh, that was nothing to worry about. It was just a few speckles of black. When I picked that snow up, my fingers were literally black. They were literally dirty. And then in the courtyard that's at Saratoga Sites, there was kids playing in this dirty black snow. And when I go up to Cohoes, and when I go up into the, I guess, not richer neighborhoods, but obviously they have more money, the snow was not black. The snow was not this color. This snow was white, like it should be. And it was just incredible. And when we go back, we keep mentioning the DEC. The DEC protects its image. Last year, Bennington College did a very fine study on the AFFF issue. And what did they do? They completely rejected it. And what did they do after that? They conduct the same exact study that Bennington College is doing, which we've now been waiting months for in regards to AFFF contamination, because as you know, this PFAS chemicals causes a wide range of diseases at people's expense, at the expense of people's health. There's no reason why people in any community, rich, poor, should be an experiment. They pretty much burned this crap to say, oh, well, we have nowhere else to burn it. Let's burn it here. Let's burn it in Cohoes. Let's burn it where people aren't going to be saying anything because we've been doing this for decades anyways. Well, guess what? It's a new decade now, and we're going to fight the good fight. And we're not going to let these awful industries dictate what we do. And we're not going to let the DEC tell us that we're wrong about what we feel, or that the people that we bring in to help us completely get discredited. No, we are going to control the narrative because the narrative is in our hands. We're not going to let the DEC create any narrative, Lafarge, Norlight, or wherever you are. It's just unacceptable. The Hudson Valley is one of the most polluted areas in the world. And the Hudson River is one of the most polluted rivers in the world. You have Lafarge, you have Norlight, you have an issue up in Glens Falls, you have the whole PCB issue in the Hudson River from GE, I believe. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And yet we have a state that claims that they know what they're doing in regards to the environment, that they're the best in the nation when it comes to environmental protections. Come to Cohoes, New York, go to Coeymans, go to anywhere in the state practically, and you'll find severe violations of people's human rights, just in regards to air. I mean, it's awful. Hoosick Falls, their water, those people are forever damaged because these are forever chemicals that we're talking about in regards to PFAS. Hazardous waste incineration. I mean, what is hazardous waste even? I mean, I've been doing this for a year, but it's just a whole slew of crap that they want to burn to save their dollar. Well, guess what? I've said this before and I'll say this again. The dollar figures are not worth my mother's health, my grandmother's health, my brother's health, my health, my girlfriend's health, my community's health. I don't care if you have a 401k. I don't care if you have any special benefits. The money does not matter when it comes to potentially millions of dollars in medical expenses. Because guess what? Healthcare is not free in this nation. And unfortunately, we have to deal with all of these issues. And that's the sick but honest reality of climate change in itself. It encapsulates every single sector that you can possibly think about. And to bring it back to what we can do now, what we can do is we have to be loud. We have to assert what we need to assert. We have to talk to the elected officials. What we were able to do in Cohoes in this past year has been phenomenal. We were able to pass a moratorium on the AFFF incineration within the Cohoes government. And then we were able to go to the county legislator and get them to ban the incineration of AFFF at Norlight. And then after that, we were able to get the governor to sign on to a bill that would prohibit this ever happening again at this facility. It's possible. It's very possible. You're gonna reach resistance after resistance after resistance, especially when we get up to the governor's office, because guess who was against this bill? the DEC, because they thought they could regulate it. They couldn't regulate this. They illegally incinerated this crap in our community for 2 years. The DEC, cares more about salamanders crossing the street, or if you're fishing illegally, or if you're just, if you're burning a tire or something, that's illegal. You'll go to jail for some of that stuff. But yet, Norlite and Lafarge and all these industries are able to emit 50, 60 pounds of mercury a year. They're able to contaminate our soils, contaminate our waters, just because they have the dollar figure to show their strength. Well, it's time for the communities to show their strength. These industries have been knocking at our communities. They've been killing us. That's the fact. I know too many people in my community who have very rare diseases that you would only get from the particular chemicals that were emitted at Norlite. So the community has to be loud, and the community also has to elect sensible people to office that can protect them. Because at the end of the day, yes, you can kick and scream, but you need those people at your county legislator, at your city government, at your state government, representing your values, what you want. If you want clean air, you should elect people that want clean air as well. And you should do whatever it takes to get those people elected, because it is a matter of life or death. It's not dramatic, it's the truth. And I'm certainly going to help as much as I can to get Coeymans back into the right direction, because they need people to represent them, their health, their families, their communities. They need those people. And I just want to say one more thing is, as I said before, we have to and we must speak up when we see something. If we see something at the facility at Lafarge, you got to call DEC. If you see something at the facility at Norlite, you have to call them, because they can't do their jobs. They cannot do their jobs. They cannot protect us. Call the local newspaper, call Sanctuary for Independent Media. They'll send people right away. They're the best people in regards to this issue. They're the best people that I've ever met in regards to the Norlite problem. They've really expanded this issue, and I'm just forever grateful. But the power in numbers is what's going to win this fight, because we can no longer let these facilities ruin our communities. We have to take the power, and the power starts with you. I know that sounds corny, but it's the truth. Calling your elected officials, telling them how you feel is what we're going to do. So thank you.
Joe, thank you so much for that. I just keep coming back to what Jane said earlier about who benefits and who is burdened. And I think that you, Carlo, and Matt have made such a great case for who is burdened by these decisions. So here's what we're going to do. Thank you so much to all the speakers. We've gotten a lot of questions in the chat box. I'm going to highlight a few of them and ask if we can get some answers. I also want to say Christine's going to come back on in a little while and talk to us about what all of you can do right now. I think she's going to share 3 different actions, and then I'm going to come back and make some announcements about things that are going on at the sanctuary that you all might be interested in. But for now, someone asked if the info in the chat, there is a lot of info being placed in the chat box. You yourself can save the chat, but we're also going to do that for you and email out to all the participants, what we've talked about in the chat box. If you have a question, type it there. We'll get to it. I don't know who these questions should go to. So whoever, if one of you, the 4 speakers or Christine, think that you can best answer these questions, jump in. One of the questions is, have any local hospitals or other healthcare institutions expressed concern or joined in any of the actions? Matt, Carlo, do you have an answer to that question?
Not that I'm aware of.
That I'm aware of. This is Christine.
Yeah, we're really just trying to get that word out there, and people don't know. I mean, that's sort of the gist of what we were saying to people is, you guys are starting to come on, and you're people that are generally, people on here generally are involved and interested anyway. We need to get out to people that don't hear this all the time because they don't realize it's going on.
Yeah,
And
it's a great idea.
I just one quick comment. I'm not sure about any hospital records, and what I do know is, and this was highly publicized, a case in the UK recently of a 6-year-old girl who had severe allergies and died. And the coroner concluded that pollution was a substantial cause of her death. That was the first time ever that science actually linked the death of a human to pollution. And this was in the UK and was about a month ago. So it's critical because any resident in a town of Coeymans or in Cohoes who suffers from severe allergies, for instance, or any kind of respiratory problem, and that can be a matter of life or death. It's no joke, literally. And perhaps there is someone out there who has that data of the amount of students who have cancer in Ravena. Who knows? I'm sure that someone can find it, but you don't have to go that far. I mean, if you have allergies, you can die from it, depending on the amount of pollution in the air. So
Carlo, Christine, I just want to speak to that. I did reach out to a couple of people who might be able to help us with finding that kind of information about, the morbidities in the town. And unfortunately, the state data, none of the data that's available drills down that far to our community. I mean, some of it's available on a county-wide basis and state basis, but to get specific increases in certain respiratory illnesses or asthmas or cancers in a local community is very difficult.
Corinne, I know a lot of people have questions. There's one piece I left out. I'll do it 30 seconds or less, that I think people should understand what we're up against too. And it's not to depress anybody, but really to get us motivated. You might have seen the Equinor wind project that recently got approved for Albany, that they're going to expand the Port of Albany to build the turbines there, right? And that's going to be to my district, which is great. But Carver also in the Port of Albany got a little piece of that. So he's doing two things. One, he's using that as, look at all this green, wonderful stuff I'm doing for the green economy, hiding all the negative stuff he's doing for solid waste management. And he's now also got some friends at high places. He's now into the state doing the good part, some green stuff. It's going to make it that much harder to get some of those people to be on our side because they're going to say the same thing. Well, he's in part of this really big, important project. So you can see the battles we're up against. Sorry.
Thanks for that addition, Matt. I think this next question is for Jane. Someone asks that Lafarge made some improvements, some retrofitting several years ago to mitigate the effects of burning coal. The person wants to know if those improvements help mitigate the burning of tires as well.
Did you know that at the end of the Second World War, 98% of the tires in this country were reused? They were revulcanized and reused, right? So you got to really understand that the whole tire burning scheme is kind of like a scheme. It's kind of like plastics, like if you look back 50 years, how much plastic was in your waste? Hardly any. Now you've just got massive amounts of plastic. And so I just kind of wanted to, there's like another sort of 100,000 foot view of this problem. Here in California, we had one legislator that was really interested in this, and we got legislation passed with him that says, hey, don't burn the tires, grind them up and put them on the roads. And you know that's what the state of Arizona does. Arizona takes all their tires and they make them into road base. So when you drive on the road in Arizona, your car doesn't bounce around, and it's cool. And one of the big impediments to this was that Caltrans, which is our big state agency that works on roads, didn't want to put investments into the new equipment that was needed to lay down the asphalt that had the ground up tires in it. Okay. So it's I'm thinking back in time over this issue, and just to let you know, there's all kinds of things that you can do with tires that are not about burning them in your community. Okay. And tires were not even routinely waste until we're in the modern age. You know, tires were revulcanized and reused. You know, Mike Ewald did some great research that even after the modernization of the kiln, which isn't that old, I think it was in 2017, that was due to a consent decree from US EPA, from Cynthia Giles, who's the head of enforcement at US EPA. The cement kiln industry was one of the of 3 major industries that the Obama administration did extensive enforcement on. And ironically, much of that some of that enforcement was done in New York, where US EPA overfiled on the state. And the Ravena kiln was one of those. Some of the kilns here in my community where I live were some of those, as well as the Norlight kiln had major investigations for enforcement. And Mike's research that he did shows clearly that you still have extensive emissions of highly toxic pollutants like dioxin and polyaromatic hydrocarbons and things like that are still coming out of that kiln. So when you modernize a kiln, a lot of times what you're looking at are things like NOx and SOx and other things. So those may have gone down, but clearly the air toxics did not. And so you cannot rely on the new fancy air pollution control devices. And I know that Mr. Richie can attest to the fact that it was just a month ago where he had a major fire where they burned hazardous waste, even though they've got a $30 million brand new scrubber on the Norlight kiln. So sorry, that's not really going to help you that much.
Thanks, Jane. I knew that question was for you. That was perfect because you answered the other question that folks asked, which is how do you get rid of tires? Well, there are alternatives.
Lots of them.
Yeah, I love that about driving easy on the road with tires in the right in the road. Great. All right. So another question we got is, how do we find out and publicize which elected officials accept money from Lafarge? I'm wondering who could answer. Matt, you're shaking your head. Can you answer that question?
I don't know if I can answer because I haven't done that research, but that is a wonderful question. That was some of the questions we had at our level, why we were getting resistance from county executive's office. I don't think we've dug into that, but somebody that likes to dig into that would be a wonderful answer.
I know that donations to public officials are public record, but there's also 1,000 ways to hide them. So
yes, and so to be clear, the people in Coeymans that took over the board will outwardly, very frequently, even recently in a legislative meeting, the new legislator down there said, we took no money from Carver or from Lafarge, but they got all kinds of crazy money from people who wouldn't normally give into politics, and that maybe didn't have that kind of money to give to politics generally. So they were very cautious about how they did it, but that's where that money came from. But it'd be great if somebody has a little bit of time on their hands and wants to dig into those, FERC records. That'd be awesome.
Well, as Judith Enck types in the chat box, the very resource-heavy chat box, the Albany County Board of Elections has records, but donations are often hidden under different names. So, but there's definitely some volunteer opportunities, as Christine notes. I think we've answered all of the questions that I could see in the chat, either here or in the chat box. And just as a reminder, you can download the chat yourself. But we'll also be sending the chat box and all its resources to people who've registered. Christine, I wonder if I should turn it over to you now to talk about the 3 actions that people can take right now, and then you can hand it back off to me for some announcements and closing up.
Okay, hi, thank you, Corinne. This has just been amazing. Thank you, all you speakers. And, it was so heartfelt, Joe. I thank you for coming and doing this. So I think one of the things that we all know is it takes a village. And as Matt said and Joe said, we all have to mobilize. And one of the things that we feel is going to be important is starting with contacting our Senator Michelle Hinchey We are going to put in the chat a link to the Clean Air Coalition blog, which will have all of this information at your fingertips, so you can easily, get involved. Her phone number will be in there. We want our newly elected senator, who is thankfully now the senator for our district where Coeymans resides, the 46th Senate District. She is a champion on energy and environmental protection, and it was what she ran on. She knows about our situation here in Coeymans, and we want to urge her to introduce a bill banning tire burning in New York State, to start off the bat, to speak to her. And get her moving. I know she's very busy, but she has expressed openness to hearing from us. And I think even before she introduces a bill, if she just hears from her constituents and beyond that this is something we want to see her do, it'll come up higher on the list. We need to all write letters to the editor expressing our views. Take what you learned tonight about the, the threats and all the things that are happening in our communities. There is 4 publications that I've included in the blog, the Albany Times-Union. It gives you the restrictions of the time, how many words and who to contact, how to send it. The Schenectady Gazette is another paper that does limit words, but they do publish just about every letter to the editor. Our local newspaper, the Ravena News-Herald, has a more stringent maximum of 1,000 characters. But when you type in the form, it does count the number of characters for you. And then the Altamont Enterprise, which is an amazing local newspaper that is really in tune to what is happening in our community here, as well as the greater Guilderland, Altamont, and Hill towns. And that one is no limit on what you write. Lastly, the Spotlight newspaper, that's in there as well, just to send your comments to the editor of the paper. The links are all in the blog. And very lastly, if you haven't already, to please join the Clean Air Coalition of Greater Ravena-Coeymans by going to info@cleanairalbanycounty.org. You can join us. We are, mobilizing. We're getting bigger every week. More people are joining us. We need a lot of help. And as Matt said, one of the things we need a lot of help with is research in a lot of areas. We have a lot of things happening in our town that, are kind of beyond my expertise in terms of, what kinds of things should we be looking at that we've foiled documents, and what has been done that really shouldn't have been done, and what do we do next with this information to try and take our town back. So those are some of the immediate things that we can all do. And I want to just thank everyone on the call and everyone here on the Zoom, and it's been an amazing event. It's more than fulfilled my expectations, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. And I really appreciate all of our speakers, Carlo, Matt, Jane, and Joe. Thank you so much for this. Thanks to the Sanctuary. I want to encourage you, if you enjoyed this program, if you got something out of this program tonight, sign up for our list at the Sanctuary for Independent Media. You can also make a donation. Like every nonprofit at this point, we're struggling, and we're doing really amazing programs here at the Sanctuary. So if you liked what you heard tonight, please sign up for our list and donate to the Sanctuary. I put the links in the box. We have a lot of really interesting stuff coming up. Right now, we have an altar to those we've lost over the past year at Freedom Square in North Central Troy. Stop by the altar to check that out. We've had community members putting up remembrances of loved ones that they've lost to violence, to COVID-19. We have 3 exciting programs coming up. We have a tentatively scheduled community forum on the merger between Ellis Medicine and St. Peter's Health Partners I encourage all of you who are interested in that issue to check out what we've done already on the radio on that issue. We're going to be holding a community forum in early March. We're also holding a program called Tending the Urban Forest on March 7th. And then on March 19th, I'm going to be headlining an event on New York's Medical Aid in Dying Act. It's a pending piece of legislation that would allow for death with dignity for terminally ill New Yorkers. That's going to be on March 19th. Someone asked earlier about social media and getting students involved in the Clean Air Coalition work. And I just want to encourage folks to sign up with the Clean Air Coalition, but also to follow the sanctuary on social media. Whenever we see videos or interesting things that we think people would get involved with, we'll highlight them on the radio, on the Hudson Mohawk magazine, and also on our Facebook page. So again, I want to thank everyone. I don't see any, people should let me know if there's anything in last words that you'd like me to share. But this chat box was fantastic. Christine, thank you for putting together this event.
Thank you, Sanctuary and Corinne, for your guidance.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. Thanks to Sonia, the filmmaker, and to Judith and Mike.
Jane.
Mike, really, really fantastic stuff.
Joe, Matt, and Carlo.
Yeah, this has been great. So have a good evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
I hope you all get involved, and it was nice to see you all. All right, take care.
Take care, everyone.
Night, everybody.